Well, hey everyone, Pat Mesiti here with a very, very special live today. You know, our world seems to be more confused than a termite and a yo-yo. And a lot of the stuff that's going on right now, especially this whole era of energy crisis and climate change, sometimes can get a little bit over our heads and we don't really understand what's going on. At least the average person doesn't. And, you know, for many of us, of course, we want a clean environment. Of course, we want to have a future for our children. And then, of course, you've got the Greta Thunberg screaming at us that we're destroying our future. And then, of course, you've got the crazies out there like Adam Bandit, or Bant as he calls himself, and the Teals, who are literally holding our nation to ransom. Well, today I want to lift the lid on that and really get down to basics on how this affects you, the average Australian or Canadian or American, how it affects us. And I've got one of my favourite people, one of the most brilliant minds, I believe, in Australian journalism, and someone that every single one of you need to get behind and support. We affectionately call her Ellie, but it's Alexandra Marshall. How are you, Alexandra? Or Ellie?
I'm very well, thank you. No, Ellie's actually my name as well. My parents call me Ellie, so you're correct.
Well, there you go. My parents called me Pasquale, and I don't know whether my father was drunk that day, but we'll leave that alone. Ellie, it seems that since Albanese's gone in, that this country is being held to ransom by a bunch of left-wing, power-crazy, they call themselves green, but I think they're fascists. What in the heck is going on out there in your mind? What's happening out there right now?
Well, the current Labor Party is simply the natural consequence of decades of reckless green policy that began before the Howard era and was propped up by every prime minister and government since then. And it began as a sort of peer pressure and bullying scenario from international bureaucracies at the UN. This was after the IPCC was founded and various climate organizations by an oil baron of all people who was a self-declared socialist and wished to see a globalized climate authority for the purposes of a globalized central world government that he hoped to fund by a 0.5% tax on all transactions to funnel 1.3 trillion into the UN. And that's how it started. And the foundations that he began are still sitting at the top of these climate networks. And the Australian government, along with other world governments, was stupid enough to be bullied into this green ideology of, oh, you're saving the planet, when it was always, from its beginnings, a money-making exercise.
Wow. Ellie, how does this affect the average Australian? Can you put it down in simple terms what this highly influenced leftist agenda, what their agenda is, and how much pain does this cause the average Australian if we let this go on?
Well, the first thing is to work out what the claim is. The claim is that this apocalypse that's supposed to be coming that never quite arrives is meant to affect the population by basically ruining the world and ending all of humanity in some kind of fiery brimstone scenario. Now, that's obviously not true, but that is the claim. And against that claim is the validation of any and all measure that makes life a little bit less good for every Australian. So the consequences of green policy for Australians is not, it doesn't save the planet, so forget that for a start. What it does do is it makes energy expensive, rare, and unreliable, which is a huge problem for civilization because the foundation of all successful civilizations is cheap, reliable energy. The second thing it does is it starts taking away all sorts of things that Australians have expected, like fresh food, variety of products and services, the freedom to run businesses how they see fit, and the market control is being usurped by government ideologues. There's a whole range. This green ideology affects literally everything, particularly in the social licenses department, where every business, including someone like me who's a writer, we're all getting given carbon ratings so that they can control what we produce and what we do. So it affects every aspect of an Australian life, and not for the better. And the one thing that's missed so often is that green ideology has led to the ignoring of pollution, which was
Mm.
20 years ago considered to be the most important environmental thing to worry about. And our planet is getting more and more polluted because people have forgotten about pollution because you can just raise taxes to tackle climate change. It's better for the government and worse for the environment at large.
That's a great point that you make, Ellie. The difference between pollution, which is real, and then this whole and people get confused. Can you just dig a little deeper into that, please? Because that's a brilliant point, absolutely brilliant point.
Okay, so most people will assume that conservatives don't care about the environment, which is completely wrong. What people should care is about reducing pollution. Now, to be clear, neither carbon nor pollution will end the world, okay? The tectonic plates are moving around. Everything we do is going to get folded under the crust of the earth and forgotten about, okay? So the planet doesn't care, but it's about human enjoyment of the planet where we have to live. And pollution is the biggest impactor of the life's enjoyment of where we live. Now, this includes plastic in the ocean. It includes chemicals leaking into the surrounding areas and just general trash. I mean, the pandemic has resulted in billions of face masks every month going into the oceans where they are suffocating wildlife and sitting on the bottom of the sea getting washed around. Now, this sort of thing is not ideal, and most conservatives believe that pollution, not carbon, should be the primary source. The problem is it's hard to deal with pollution because it's a real construct. You have to go and pick up rubbish. You have to process it in plants. And people can see when they walk around the streets whether or not you're actually doing a good job. So the one thing that governments don't want to do is draw attention to the pollution crisis that their negligence has created by pursuing carbon.
Australian industry and Australian jobs are very much linked to, our mining, our coal and everything. I found it incredibly hypocritical, and we'll get to some other stuff, that the Australian government, 80,000 tonnes of coal land in the Ukraine to fight their cause, but yet isn't it a boo-boo and a nasty and a naughty in these leftist minds to be even considering that? How does it's okay for Ukraine, but it's not okay here?
Here's the problem with coal. Coal is required and irreplaceable in many instances, including the creation of steel and other productions of various manufacturing. So forget energy for a minute. Steel and coal's never going to go away. We require it as part of civilization. And so they can demonize coal all they like, but every government in the world requires coal to be dug out of the ground and used in some way, shape, or form. Another example of the hypocrisy would be Australia making a fortune shipping our coal to China, the world's largest geopolitical aggressor, to build weapons and power their cities while they are expanding into the Pacific. Now, that, for me, is a far worse behavior from our government and an oversight from a geopolitical viewpoint. Now, my argument with coal has never been its emissions. It has been the fact that coal is a limited resource. It technically is limited, and we are going to need coal well into the future. So my argument has always been, why not replace energy with something like nuclear, which we have lots of, literally billions of years worth, and reserve coal for our manufacturing industry where we require it, so that we can become once again a manufacturing superpower. That would be my argument.
Alexandra, it seems to me, before I get some other question I want to ask you, it seems to me that this is very much, WEF agenda driven. Am I just jumping at ghosts here, or is this some strategic globalist plan? Because it seems like they're all singing from the same songbook, or the old, if you're a church goer, the old hymnal, but it seems like they're all coming from the same songbook. Am I off centre here, or is there some, in your mind, I'm an emotional kind of thinker, where you're very strategic. Is there, in your opinion, some kind of strategic globalist agenda behind all this?
Well, it is coming out of the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. They're sort of a joint little venture here. The question is not where it's coming from, it's why. So the World Economic Forum is, above all else, it's a closed-door lobbying event between governments and businesses. And so the reason the World Economic Forum does things like drive an anti-carbon energy policy for energy specifically, let's not forget, there's one article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago, pointing out that pharmaceutical companies are the world's largest users and emitters of carbon and petroleum, which most people have no idea about. So they're not going to limit these technologies. It's specifically about energy. And the reason that they target carbon and energy is because they have other products to sell. So they want to make money from the renewables industry, and specifically the mining boom that comes behind renewables. So a lot of the, let's call them people who want to help the environment in teal seats and left-wing seats, who believe genuinely, although misguided, that they are going to save the planet. They think that going green means they will stop mining, but that's the reverse of what's true. Renewables require a dramatic increase in mining and therefore wealth for mining corporations, which is why they're pushing green energy. Now, how this works is a mining company has a portfolio full of what were previously basically worthless minerals and metals. Going green allows them to sell off part of this portfolio at an up to 600% markup, because they're using these minerals in renewables. So they're making a fortune off a part of their portfolio, which they had written off previously. Now, they know that renewables aren't going to work. Everyone understands the mechanics of renewables not being a long-term solution. So what then happens is, when they finish selling renewables, these mining corporations go back to coal and back to nuclear after they've cleared their portfolio. So it is quite literally a business plan to sell more minerals in the short term and make more profits. And so the mining companies pressure places like the World Economic Forum, who are all too happy to lean on governments to make these deals for their mates and corporate alliances. And it is a cynical, political, and corporate decision. It's not about world savior, but it is dressed up that way. But that is all it is, window dressing.
Alexandra, it seems like the mainstream, via the new ex-blue ribbon Liberal seats, they all went teal. Now, let me ask, these people with these agendas, do they think that nuclear? Well, let me ask you this: why is nuclear power, or is nuclear power superior to renewables in your estimation?
Okay, well, almost everything is superior to renewables, so that's probably a bad comparison. Just to put it in perspective, we don't have enough raw materials on Earth to build the renewables grid once. And the renewables grid must be replaced every 20 years minimum, but probably more like every 10 years. And so from an engineering standpoint, it is not a solution of any kind. It's also an energy negative solution, so it takes more energy to build and maintain a renewables grid than it does to produce energy. So it's not a solution to any civilization problem. So let's just set that aside. Let's say, is nuclear better than coal, for instance, or gas? The answer is yes. Nuclear is an extraordinarily dense energy resource. So a pellet about this big of uranium will power a city for a year. And the total amount of waste from the entire nuclear program for the last, I think it's 50 years, fits inside a football field in America. And it's contained, and you leave it sit there for a little while, for a few thousand years, and becomes completely inert. So human beings are worried about, it's going to be radioactive for a few hundred years. Okay, but it's going to be isolated in a desert somewhere where no one's going to go. And the planet doesn't care about 1,000 years. The planet's 4.5 billion years old to start with. So 1,000 years sitting cooling its heels is nothing to the planet, nothing at all. And it's contained, unlike the waste of every other energy generating source, except perhaps hydro. So nuclear also has the benefit of there being at least 4 billion years worth of energy. So that is not just the first generation reactors. There's also breeder reactors that take the waste from other nuclear reactors and then reprocesses it once again as a new fuel source. So it's an incredibly closed network, efficient way of harnessing energy. Which is what humanity needs. We need a reliable source of energy that has small amounts of it, creates lots of energy, and it's easy to maintain. Now, the great thing about nuclear, which was discovered a long time ago, is that you can make nuclear reactors that live for 100 plus years, which is, so it's expensive to create the reactor, but it has an extremely small ongoing cost. So the longer the reactor is there, the cheaper the energy becomes, which means by about year 50, it's pretty much on par with a hydro plant that requires very little interference. That is the reverse of coal. It's the reverse of renewables. So it is, by all means, a sustainable, scalable energy grid, which is exactly what we want for human civilization to flourish, which is why the rest of the world is building hundreds of new reactors, because they realize that this is the solution not to climate, but to energy, which is the actual question.
Just a little thought just came to me then, a little bit off kind of where we're at right now, but I find it amazing that Australia, which supposedly represents 1% of the problem, has got this 40%, they're pushing for 70% emissions, reduction. Yet China, surprise, surprise, who is the biggest offender, mind you, who started a little problem a couple of years ago globally, we won't mention the problem, they seem to be getting away with just all kinds of, you guys can do that, but we're going to do this and stuff you. Why are they allowed to be treated like an elitist country? Is it fear about them? What is it? Or is it because they are the money and they control the money, so we leave them alone? Why Australia? Why little Australia, and yet big China gets away with it?
So China has built itself up as a military force and a cashed up one at that. So money and power are the two things that allow you to do pretty much whatever you want on the global stage. For the Pacific, as an example, like we keep hearing that Scott Morrison lost the election because the Pacific sided with China over net zero targets, which may be the most ridiculous thing that anybody's ever said and got away with on camera. And you can just prove it in a few seconds by showing that the same day that they are rejecting Australia, they are signing memorandums with China, which is the world, as you say, the world's biggest emitter. And not only emitter, they are also the world's worst polluter. I mean, 70% of rivers in China are not fit for human contact, let alone consumption. So as far as saving the planet, China is not the answer, nor is communism. But what China has is this wallet which they open to these Pacific nations and say, well, sign with us and we will funnel hundreds of thousands of dollars into the individuals behind government and millions into your electoral campaigns, which is exactly what they have done. But more to the point, and here's where the real hypocrisy about Australia's rhetoric regarding net zero China and the Pacific is. The Solomon Islands, which is the most recent example of this rhetoric, has signed an agreement with China to allow China to mine the deep sea minerals of oil and gas and renewables in the sea waters in the Solomon Islands region. And not only that, but to overfish its water, to cut down its trees. Like, they have signed this deal, which has nothing to do with the environmental protection of the Pacific region and everything to do with the Solomon Islands, allowing China to mine it and then scooping off the profits from this endeavor. So how dare the Big Islands tell Australia that they cannot mine their resources to power Australia and feed the world, which is what Australia does, while they allow China to sweep in and mine their own backyard. And at no point has Scott Morrison, Peter Dutton, or Albanese mentioned this hypocrisy, because they want to keep funneling money to the Pacific Islands in the hope that China won't be able to buy influence there, which is essentially the same as protection money you'd pay to the mafia. And of course it doesn't work, because these islands were taking money from both and then allow China to build bases wherever they like, because they're also afraid of China. And Australia's offered no counter to that point of view. I mean, we haven't said, hey, if you put a Chinese base there, we won't rescue you in the occurrence that communism goes wrong, which is what Australia should say. If you want our protection and our money, well, then you can't keep doing deals with China under the table.
Unlike the mafia, these guys affect civilians. The mafia doesn't attack civilians, they attack their own. These guys seem to be hell-bent on attacking the civilians and the everyday Australian. Now, but wouldn't all this mining and everything else destroy the ocean floor, our ecosystem and all that? Wouldn't that add more problems to the issue?
So we call it the blue economy, which is the undersea mining resources. and just to fill people in. These occur along the cracks of tectonic plates. This is where all the valuable minerals are kind of pushed out and left there sitting on the ocean floor. There is more wealth of mining sitting on the ocean floor in the Pacific regions, around the bottom of Alaska and underneath the Horn of Africa, than there is in the entirety of the continents on Earth. So we are talking about trillions of dollars worth of mining material, and a lot of it is to do with rare earths. So you can understand why a mining company would push governments into renewables policy so they can justify the mining of these valuable assets. Now, who holds the mining contracts for the Pacific mining? Almost entirely China, and they are given out by the UN, which is meant to be a protection authority for the ocean floor, but they've come out and said that no, their job is not to protect the ocean floor, it is to work out who is allowed to mine it. Something that, I mean, I'm not normally agree with Greenpeace, but I do agree with them on this issue, that is like asking the wolf to guard the sheep when it comes to renewables mining. Now, this sort of mining, it's not like a mine on the surface where you dig a hole, take out what you want, you fill the hole back in again, and nature kind of just grows back over the surface, because that's what nature's quite good at doing on the surface of the earth. It's prolific and it's fast-moving environment. But the sea is a high-pressure, very cold environment, and so things move slowly. And this mining sucks up the surface of the ocean floor, including animals that happen to be down there, to extract the mining materials, and then it moves on, and as it moves, all the silt then falls back onto the ocean floor and suffocates everything that's down there. Now, what it's killing is not just the larger animals, but all the breeding grounds for the bottom of the food chain, which then, of course, affects everything on the way up, like all the way to whales. And so this is what they call it as a scorched earth approach under the ocean, where they are completely destroying the ecosystem wherever they mine, in the breeding grounds of the world's ocean's food supplies. We have no idea what this will do to the food chain in the ocean. None. We have no idea how fast or even if the food chain can survive wide-scale mining. This isn't like
that's very
like
scary.
Like tectonic plates move slowly, okay? They look pretty dramatic, but they are slow-moving entities. They take millions of years to get anywhere. So life sort of knows how to deal with these cataclysmic places on the sea floor. But a mining operation zooming through is something that undersea life is not evolved to handle, and nor can it recover considering how slowly it moves. So it also is presumed to add to the acidification of the ocean because of all the silt it puts out. And this is the exact reverse of everything that the teals say they believe in. And what's it being driven? Primarily electric vehicles. They're the primary cause driving deep sea mining. So if you want to save the planet, ditch your electric car, because it is leading to the destruction of oceans.
Get into that. I mean, all this solar, wind, batteries, transport operation, all that, doesn't all this require more carbon emissions? It seems to me that these guys have absolutely no clue when it comes to, number one, economics, number two, the real damage to the planet. But how much of a drain is all of this on the public, like you and me, the average mum and dad out there? How much of a drain is all this on public money?
Okay, so forget coal for a second. If you want the whole of Australia to be driving electric vehicles, like, let's just presume that the Teals get their wish and they manage to legislate it. Well, you're not going to be able to do that unless you have nuclear power plants, because the only energy source that we can put in time to power a grid that will require out of hours electricity, primarily at night when your solar panels aren't going to be working, is nuclear. So if you want an electric vehicle future, then you have to be a supporter of nuclear energy. You've got no choice on that matter. Otherwise, everyone will come home, plug their cars in, and that'll be it for the grid every night. Something else that people haven't thought about is we have blackouts now because we have a power energy deficiency, because for some reason people keep shutting down our remaining baseload power plants. Now, it's okay to have a blackout when you've got things like a gas stove cooker, which we had a power out in my house that lasted for 2 days a little while ago. And I could still cook food because I have that, which I noticed that Victoria is now outlawing gas cooking. So have fun in the next blackout, kids. You won't be able to heat water or cook food. But what happens to the economy and to a city when you've got no electricity and all your cars require electricity to charge? Do we
Mm,
start having electric vehicles left scattered through the streets? How
yeah.
much of a mess are we creating with this reliance on a single source to power civilization? Now, this is the other thing you have to be very careful about. As civilizations become bigger, you must not become centralized. So
Mm,
if you've got gas cars and electric for this and something for that, well, then you're quite a robust civilization. But if
mm,
everything relies on one plant or one source of energy, then you are extraordinarily easy to cripple, which is a huge failing, not just geopolitically, in case someone, I'm not going to mention names, but let's say someone in the Pacific gets a little bit antsy and starts throwing a few things around out of the cot. It's also a danger just for general problems that happen in society, like a blackout or a storm, and suddenly your entire civilization crashes to a halt, and it's difficult to get it going again because you have put, as the old saying goes, all your eggs in one basket,
mm.
and the worst basket ever would have to be a new renewables grid. I just want to say one thing. I'm a huge fan of Nikola Tesla. He was my hero growing up through school, and he's the father of energy essentially. And he looked at solar and wind, and he acknowledged them as a good source of energy, but only in specific circumstances in which you were removed from an energy grid or you're isolated, or it was for powering things like solar lights on your gates, immaterial things. He dismissed it entirely as a baseload energy production, and he was right. Obviously, the best source of energy is hydro, but it's only a circumstantial source of energy. You can't fill Australia with hydroelectric things. It's not. We don't have enough height or the right resources to do so. So you have to fall back on something like nuclear, of which we have all the resources we could ever want.
Ellie, Europe's cutting down old growth forests for wood chip to feed so-called green energy for biofuel. At what point does the average person admit, hey, I'm being conned here by all these UN definitions of green and renewable? At what point do we go, hey, you guys are conning us?
It's so hard not to lose faith in your fellow humans when you sit there and watch supposedly educated people accept absolute rubbish at face value and never once have the ability to question what they are seeing and the logic behind it. I do start to worry that how can you argue the validity of science with someone who can watch old growth forests in Germany? These are the Hansel and Gretel forests from the storybooks being chopped down, put through the wood chipper, and then burned as a biomass fuel, which the UN then turns around and the European Union says, yes, that's a green and renewable source of energy. I mean, that is the reverse of everything environmentalism tells us about preserving the older forests and our natural resources. And yet, because the EU and UN say that it's renewable, well, suddenly people are on board with it. Now, I'm sure that after a few calm coffees and a chat, then most Australians, even the Teals, would have to admit that this is not the vision they had for renewable energy. It simply isn't. And yet no one, not Albanese, not the leaders at the UN Forum stands up and challenges these classifications that are being handed out. I mean, nuclear energy began life as the green source of energy approved by the United Nations and the European Union as the way forward. And then they stripped nuclear of that rating for about 20 years for no reason at all. Nothing changed with the energy. And now they've given the rating back to them, showing that this rating system is almost entirely used as a mechanism to approve policy so that various companies can build whatever plants they want. Now, how can you give solar and wind a green energy rating when their windmills and their solar panels destroy the local environment and kill wildlife? I mean, how can you stand there and say, yeah, we're fine with the endangered sea life being minced to pieces along our coast because the UN told us this is a green technology? People have to start questioning what they are told and looking at what they're given more than just the hashtag that appears on social media, because you are not being virtuous or moral or a savior by supporting technologies that lie about their environmental credentials.
Ellie, where do we find you? Brilliant as usual. Where do we find you? And before, don't switch off, guys, because I've got some pretty hard-hitting things to say once Ellie leaves. I need you to switch on, and some really important answers. Ellie, Alexandra, where do we find you? How can we find you? I want to encourage everyone, if you don't subscribe to Spectator Magazine, get it. Follow Ellie. Where do we find you, Ellie?
Well, you can find me mostly on Twitter at Ellie Melly, which is ELLYMELLY. But if you search my name, you will find me, I guarantee it. If you want to keep me writing and in a job, you can either donate to my little PayPal account, which is on my Twitter feed, or more importantly, you can subscribe to The Spectator, where I am the online editor. And by subscribing to The Spectator, you are helping writers like me to uncover the truth about this movement and other ridiculous political movements in Australia. There's almost nobody writing about it except us. So if you want to read the real news and you want to keep seeing the truth behind what these governments are saying, give us a little subscription. We've got a deal going. Right now you get a free umbrella, so you can be shielded from rain that's not meant to exist. So that's our current promotion.
Now, is this like a Mary Poppins umbrella, or what kind of umbrella is it? It's a
umbrella. I'm trying to see if I can get myself one of these umbrellas.
Yeah, hey, I'll get one. Alexandra, thank you. Now, folks, thanks so much, Alexandra. Brilliant as always. We've got to get you back. I want to talk a little bit about this whole voice thing at some later date. But, folks, let me tell you, this is nothing more than control. It's nothing more than a leftist agenda to control our economy, to control our food, control our food shortages, basically to control your movement. Make no mistake about it. Electronic cars, we can unplug you. We can starve you. And this is why it's important, folks, that we really understand this is going to cost jobs. This is going to start, costing us a lot of relational challenges. And we've got to be equipped. We can't wait for it to bang. Oh, it's all of a sudden upon us, and then we start doing something for ourselves. We need to start preparing now for tomorrow. Have you got cash reserves out there? Have you got a strategic plan for your finances? Believe me, it's going to cost you jobs. We said this for the last couple of years. This is the whole issue about controlling you. And as I say to you, if you give them the power to feed you, you give them the power to control you. Don't do that. This is a truth forum here. And with that in mind, this coming Wednesday, please get on board with our Financial Freedom event with my great friend, Sean Ellison. I know Sean helped me during some difficult times, and one just strategic investment made generated 25,000 USD overnight. So guys, if you want to be part of that, it's mesidi.com/SA. There will be a link. There it is up there on the screen. There will also be a link in the chat. This coming September, I don't want to overwhelm you with too much. We're going to be launching our rallies we're going to start in Beaudesert, go through Queensland. We're going to be going to South Australia and many other states in Australia. But we need your support. We can't do this on our own. We have my earpiece here is falling out. Apologies about that. We have quite a substantial budget to meet for these rallies, and we need your financial support. We can't do it without our partners, particularly our reborn partners and so forth. And thank you for the help that we're able to do, able to put on programs like this. If you'd like to support us, here is the link for that. You can be a partner with us or make a donation. Our budget's about $100,000 for these rallies. By the time you advertise the market and venues and everything, they're huge. But we need to turn this nation around. Come on, when hope, wish and pray isn't a strategy where we can turn this nation around. Now, we do need to pray and we do need hope, but we need some practical strategies. And I believe a spiritual awakening is what is necessary. So those of you that want to support us, there it is. And of course, you can follow us on all our platforms, particularly in Instagram. We need obviously, we've been shadow banned by Instagram. They still haven't locked us out of that jail. But you can follow us on there if you go to mesidi.com/links. Now, guys, I am concerned about this agenda that has been driven by the leftists. If something's been driven by the left and they're driving it hard, it's scary. It's scary. Just like this whole thing with The Voice. We don't even know what it is. Our Indigenous leaders don't even know what it is. It seems that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors around a lot of these agendas. A lot of it doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, it's because it's senseless. If it doesn't make sense, it's because it's senseless. Why would you destroy farming? Why would you destroy the ocean? I love what Alexandra said. Yes, we must be concerned about pollution, and I agree. That's the real issue here. And I might add, this is our Father's earth while we're at it. This is our Father's earth. But we've been entrusted to look after it. And what these government and lefties and Teals and Adam Bant are doing is not looking after. They're lining their pockets. It's not follow the science, it's follow the money. Now, I'll have more to say about this and this whole thing about The Voice later on this week. But guys, share this message. Don't just like, don't just listen. Can you share out there? If every single one of you that watches it shares it, it would cause a tsunami. And we need to make our voices be heard. You are the people of Australia and those of you beyond. This is a global issue. It's a global agenda. And we need to make global statements that are intelligent, articulate. Use some of the information that Alexandra's given you. Follow her and follow the guys on Spectator. They will be able to put it in concise terminology for you to be well equipped. Don't fall for anything that just gets posted on social media. Truth is important. The Master said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Not a truth, the truth. So let's get the truth. Anyway, thank you, Alexandra. Thanks to all our team back there. Please like, subscribe, share, follow us on all the platforms. Support us if you would. I'll see you on Wednesday for our Financial Freedom Summit. Remember, if you give them the power to feed you, you give them the power to starve you. Don't give them that power. Get educated. We'll see you Wednesday. God bless everyone.